Hi, everybody. Welcome to Inside Scoop with Sue. Um, we are really honored today to have Dr. James Mazza. That's we just confirmed the pronunciation. Dr. James Mazza, who is a school psychologist and an adolescent suicidologist. So, first of all, I wanted in the chat that if you think you or someone you know is at risk, we ask you to please call the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, which is available 24/7. It's a new easy number. It's 988. And you can also, if teens are so much more apt to do texting. So there's also a crisis text line, and that one is 741-741. So that information is in the chat if you need it. Now, I just want to start with tell us what a suicidologist is.
Yeah, so a suicidologist is somebody who studies the factors, the interventions, the prevention side of trying to reduce suicidal behavior amongst the population they're studying.
Okay, so you're studying youth suicide, which is the second leading cause of death in the United States, and of course should send off alarms in all of us.
Yep.
What are the actual statistics? Like, how many people will I know around me that are teenagers that are either going to have suicidal ideation or a suicide attempt or success?
Wow. So that's going to be tough because we don't often know. So if I give you the stats, roughly 15 out of 100,000 youth are dying by suicide per year. That's that 15 to 19-year-old category. The numbers come down a little bit more between 10 and 14. And believe it or not, we also have suicide amongst 5, 6, and 7-year-olds. And so that does occur too, right? You're looking at kindergarten, first grade, second grade, like, whoa, how can they be doing that, right? And so, yeah, it is there. So regarding suicidal ideation, Sue, you're going to be surprised. About 1 out of 8 to 1 out of 9 kids in just a 12-month period of time will have thought about suicide. All right. And then there's a few less that then make a plan, and then a few less in that attempt. But by the time you have a graduating senior from high school, well, 1 out of 8 to 1 out of 9 have attempted suicide. So you're looking at 10 to 12, 15%.
All right. Well, so that's overwhelming. I mean, I thought 10 was unusually young, but wow. I mean, it's just hard to imagine those younger ages. And every parent's worst nightmare to even have this conversation and think about it. So, can you identify who's at risk, who's most at risk for suicide?
We can identify kids. So we're not really good at prediction. And that's kind of the elusiveness of suicide prevention here, is that we often will miss some of the people that die from their suicide attempt the next time. What we can do is we do know that there are risk factors, right? And we do know that those risk factors help us to kind of alert our system, our antennae as parents, to say something's going on. I should be asking my child different questions, or I should be taking them to a mental health professional to see what's going on. And so, those types of things tend to be lack of interest of things. Stop playing sports or going to the clubs or playing with their friends like they used to do, lethargic, feeling sad and blue, maybe quite often, things that would be a really opposite of what our adolescents tend to do. So our adolescents tend to be very social, tend to be high energy, tend to want to get out and be adventurous. And so if you've got the opposite occurring, that's in a short period of time, that's not usually your child's personality, that's suggesting to you that, hey, might be worth just checking into. Now, it could be nothing, or it could be something. And I always want my parents to err on the side as it could be something.
Now, we could be living with that teenager for a long time before so many teenagers are sullen or moody and are changing every day.
Correct.
So honestly, how do we know when this is just adolescence and when this is
hard to know, right? I think that's one of the ones that we have, especially at the adolescent age. How do we know this is just an adolescence? Because adolescents are, they can be moody, right? They can have hormones that are going on. It's just, they don't know why they're reacting as fast as they are, or as strongly as they are with their emotions, or it could be more. So if it's more chronic, where we're seeing it pretty constantly, right? I'd be a little bit more worried. If it's the roller coaster, ups and downs and ups and downs, I'd still want to talk to them during their downtimes. And I would want to make sure that if I'm a parent to say, hey, any of those times that you're starting to see this roller coaster going down again, let me know. We'll go for a walk. I'll talk and I'll just listen, right? I'll be non-judgmental and just listen to what's going on, because all of us have kind of gone through this during our own adolescence. And so times when kids struggle, when they feel like they don't have any support, it becomes times when that usually gets a lot worse, where their main support group is their parents, even though in adolescence they're trending away from parents, trying to go to peers. Our research shows that actually peer support in the area of mental health and suicidal behavior is not nearly as strong as it is from the parents.
So I say to my kid, you're looking a little down. Let's go for a walk. And I'm really here just to listen. And
Yep.
your kid is not interested in talking. Let's say willing to go on the walk, but not interested in talking.
Yep.
Is just that activity helpful for them?
Yes. One, it moves the body. So that's helpful, right? So behavioral activation is a really good intervention for kids that are depressed, whether male or female, whether LGBTQ, whether non-bi, doesn't matter, right? Movement is really good for the body and for the brain. All right. You being there, willing to have that discussion is important. It signals that I'm here, right? And it's up to the adolescent to be able to want to talk about things. Now, most parents, after putting in, 15 minutes worth of a walk and not a single word being spoken, I will bet there'll be something that gets said, right? And so maybe it's just chitter chatter the first time. The second time or the third time, it might be the weather. And then you start to get some things there. And one of the ways to do that, Sue, is to simply say, Sue, I love you so much. You're my, love of my life. I know things are difficult. I just don't know sometimes what they are and how I can help. And so I really need you to tell me what I can do, how I can help, because that's what I want to do as a parent without any judgment.
That's a
And then
great sentence.
drop it from there. Yeah. Let them
I
talk.
like, can you say that sentence one more time? Because I think when
I don't know. Let me try that one more time.
well, I love the idea where we can have language sitting in the back of, because sometimes it's hard to pull up what it is
yeah,
we want to say at that moment.
sure. So I would say something like, Sue, I love you a lot. I know that there are times when things are difficult, and I'm not here to solve all those. What I'm here to do, because I love you, is just to listen. And I would love to find a way that I can help if you let me help, or if I know what's going on. And because I care that much, I'm trying to go for this walk with you to see what I can do to help.
So one of the things we've heard a lot over the years is that we should be asking our kids if they have thoughts of suicide.
Yes, you should.
Okay, it's terrifying.
It's terrifying because you're not used to it. What's interesting is that once you start to ask your kiddos, hey, you seem really down, things seem to be changing. Are you thinking about hurting yourself? Are you thinking about killing yourself? Right? It rolls off just like, do you want dessert? I mean, for my family, because we ask all the time, we're just like, okay. And so our kids are just used to it. So it becomes just the norm of who you are as a loving parent, rather than, oh my gosh, that's a huge stigmatizing issue in the world.
Well, it's two things, I think. One is we don't talk about it,
We don't. That
right?
stigmatizes. Yep.
And maybe there's more than that. Because one is, if you say yes, what do I do? Like
Mm,
it's kind of like that's a big burden now that, of course, it
yeah.
seems counterintuitive. We should want to know. But I think there's another thing. We have this feeling like we're putting the idea in their head.
Well, so let me go to the second one. So that second one is one of the biggest myths that we have in suicide. So that's something we know from our suicide research. There's some pretty good articles out now that suggest that talking about suicide and asking about suicide does not give them any more ideas. It's like talking about sex. Remember back in the 80s, we couldn't talk about sex because it only gave them ideas. And that prevention strategy was a disaster, right? That, we had our teenage pregnancy rates just doubling and tripling because we weren't talking about a subject that was actually on kids' minds. The same goes here, right? Most likely, if you talk to, so I have a 10-year-old, my 10-year-old knows what suicide is. My 14-year-old is very aware of anybody that might be thinking about it already. So I'm not going to give them any ideas at this point. What I want to do is say, hey, look, I am willing to have a conversation with you about any topic, any place, anywhere, if it's on your mind. And I'll listen, right? Again, the idea that, I think sometimes our adolescents don't talk to us because for a major part of their life, we've been the parent and we've been judging them and we've been telling them what's right and wrong. And this is where we have to start flipping our switch as the parent to say, I'm not going to tell you what's right and wrong. I don't even know if I even have the answers. What I do know is that I love you. And I do know that I can see you hurting, and that hurts me. So let's go do something together. And that might be even you as a parent going to see a mental health therapist or professional during the first session or the first 2 sessions with your adolescent.
And are kids typically honest when you ask them the question?
The kids that I've worked with, yes. And there'll be times when I know that information and the parent doesn't, because the kids are too afraid to tell their parents. So, yep, they're usually
Okay.
honest.
So now I ask my kid, summon up the courage. I ask my kid
Yep.
and they say yes.
Yes. So
What
then
do I
you say, I'm so sorry that you're hurting. I didn't realize you're hurting that much. Wow, that's a heavy burden. So we gotta, and that's really, really important that we use the word we're in this together. So we're going to figure this out. And if you're in hell, I'm in hell with you, and I'm not coming out of hell without you, right? We're going to get you, we're going to get help together, right? Because there might be some things that I'm doing that are making things worse. Might be some things that you can do to help things get better. And then what I would do is I'd call people that you know that might be in the area. I'd look at, see if you can find some referrals from people that maybe have experienced this before, other parents, and then start from there.
Okay. So it's getting intervention. It's figuring out
Yeah,
who the
it
right
is.
person.
And if you think that you've got a high risk adolescent, right, teen there, or even a tween, right, because 12, even 11 years old, we do know that cognitive behavior therapy and dialectical behavior therapy are really good strategies and really good empirically based interventions. I would start there with people who provide cognitive behavior therapy for adolescents and dialectical behavior therapy for adolescents in that regard. And as a matter of fact, if it's high-risk teens, I'd probably start on the dialectical behavior therapy side first to help with the emotion regulation.
So is there a quick way to tell us what they are and what the difference is?
Well, so dialectical behavior therapy is a type of cognitive behavior therapy. Where it's a little bit different, where it has some uniqueness, is that the dialectical behavior therapy has what we call an acceptance and change approach. It's a teeter-totter. We first accept that we're hurting, that things are really lousy for us, and we need to make change, right? Whereas cognitive therapy emphasizes the cognitions that we're having. And some of our adolescents, my kids even, right? We can say, hey, look, you're having an irrational thought. And my teen will say, no kidding. Thanks, Dad. And I'm like, oh, so that didn't go over well at all, right? That went over like a ton of bricks. Whereas dialectical behavior therapy says, oh, that doesn't look like you're really angry and upset. And instead of me saying you're having an irrational thought, which is only going to fuel them more, like, geez, thanks for telling me, I already know that. Dialectical behavior therapy says, seems like you're really high on an anger. Let's go do something to distract. Let's go swimming. Let's go for a walk. Let's do something that distracts you from that emotion, because we don't make good decisions in emotion mind. Teens nor parents make good decisions in emotion mind. And distraction or changing the body's chemistry starts lowering the intensity of the emotion to where they can get to a place where they can make more effective cognitive decisions.
Okay. And someone who has, yeah, it actually was great. Okay. Someone who works using DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, will indicate that when you look them up. That will be right there. Easy to find. Because
DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, is, as far as I'm aware from the latest research, is the strongest empirically based intervention for suicidal people.
All right. That's great to know, because often we're looking for therapists and we think every therapist is equal, and you really have to find the right one for your kid, first of all, and also with the right.
That's right. So if we think about why do adolescents become suicidal? We thinking about that, right? We know that it's often the high emotional pain that they're experiencing, not physical pain, the high emotional pain that causes all this discomfort within our bodies and our minds. And we start convincing ourselves that no one loves us, we have no friends, I'm just a burden to my family, right? All emotional pain. We don't teach any of those skills in schools to deal with that, right? We teach a lot of physical pain stuff, right? How to put Band-Aids on, how to wash out scrapes so they don't get infected, how to, bones or whatever else that is. So we know the physical side because we often are getting those bumps and bruises. We don't teach about the emotional bumps and bruises that people may experience. And that's where I think DBT has a real strength in that regard.
So can parents teach those kind of protective factors? Like, I know you talk about a toolbox. If
Yeah.
schools aren't doing it, is that something that parents can do?
Sure. I think parents would be an excellent teacher. The issue that will often arise, and we hear it from our kids sometimes, because we teach and train people around the world here about emotional regulation skills, is that sometimes they just want their dad, not the teacher of skills, right? Stop teaching me. I just want dad. And hard to separate. I mean, and my kids say that. So I've had Grace, when I'm telling her, this emotion is really high. She's like, stop. I just want validation. Wow. That's my 10-year-old, right? Like, there's a strong message, right? Dad, you missed it. All she wants is a hug. So, yep, you're right.
Yeah,
That's
well,
hard.
that reaction is definitely one of a psychologist's child, because my kids have never said, I just want validation.
Well, it is true. Our kids do have a little advantage on the language. That is true.
Okay, so like my kids have said to me, no more life lessons, which I
Yep.
think is basically the same kind of thing. So
Yep.
if schools aren't teaching it, and our kids don't want us to be like kind of on them all the time well, first of all, tell us what those what's in the toolbox that we'd be talking about, and then where else could we get that for our kids?
Yep. Okay. So the toolbox that we're trying to teach through what we call our DBT Steps A curriculum, right? And the Steps A stands for skills training for emotional problem solving for adolescents. So it's just skills from the DBT comprehensive therapy. So it's not therapy itself, it's just the skills part. Is that, remember I said there's some acceptance that has to occur in DBT and change, right? It's a teeter-totter going back and forth. We teach mindfulness and distress tolerance. I got to make sure my hands are right. So this is the acceptance side, that yes, I have to accept that I'm feeling kind of depressed. I have to accept that we're moving from Minnesota to California. I have to accept that, my parents are getting divorced, right? So that's the acceptance side. And I'd like to change the intensity of the anxiety I have in meeting new people. I like to change my relationship with my parents so I'm not so angry, right? So it's a balance of both. You can't do both of these at the same time, though. So what happens is, if your emotions are really tense and you want to scream at your parent, right? You're over here on this side. So I'm going to give a distress tolerance skill so I'm not so angry. I don't bite the head off of my parent. And when that comes down, then I can come over here and use one of my change skills so that I can have a more effective conversation with the parent. Does that help?
Yeah. So you said mindfulness, distress tolerance.
Yep.
And then
emotion regulation and interpersonal effectiveness are on the change side. So those 4 areas, and that constitutes a lot of dialectical behavior therapy as well. So the skills that we teach in schools through this curriculum are the exact same skills in those 4 modules that is taught in comprehensive therapy for DBT.
Okay, so now I'm listening to this and I think this sounds great.
Yeah.
I'm not in a position to teach this to my kid. There's obviously DBT, but are there other ways to is there some other school area that I could go to get this for my kid?
Sure. So it doesn't have to be, the DBT skills. Maybe your school is doing social emotional learning through Ruler or through Lions Quest or through some other type of social emotional learning curriculum. I think that would be fine. So it's, again, just trying to find language to identify emotions, find strategies that help you deal with some of those emotions when they come up. I mean, zones of regulation is one that we hear and see quite a bit in the elementary school, just like Second Step, which is really popular as well throughout the country. So all of those would feed into helping our youth understand why they're having emotions and then strategies to deal with those.
Okay, Ruler is a psychologist from Yale, right? What's his name?
Yep. Mark Brackett.
Mark Brackett. So we have an interview with Mark Brackett, Jessica, if you can find that, and we talk about Ruler. Maybe you can put that in the chat. Okay, so I have a question to you about suicide, which is are in terms of like spontaneous, or like, is there a more common, I've thought about it, I've plotted it, I'm doing it, or how is that in terms of like this spontaneous decision?
Right. More times than not, it's not spontaneous. It's been thought after and thought about what way to do it and how to do it for quite a period of time. Right. So, and then what happens is there's some precipitating event that kind of ignites the person's desire to take their life at that point, or to engage in the method that they've been thinking about. So the vast majority of kids who die from suicide have already made previous attempts. So rarely do we find somebody who's died on their very first attempt. And so it's happened time and time again. The issue is that often parents don't know that their child's attempted suicide. So 7 out of 8 parents don't know their child's attempted suicide. That's a scary statistic.
And do their friends know?
Some will, some won't. So the idea is this, because suicide is something that is within the control of the adolescent, there is a disincentive for them to tell other people, from the standpoint of, if they want control and do it again, then they don't want to tell anybody. There's an incentive to tell other people for them to get help. And most of our kids really do want to get help. They don't want to die. It's not really within our biological species to be dying and wanting to die in like some of the prime time of your life as an adolescent.
So if they're not trying to die, what are they, just trying to escape their current pain?
That's exactly right. They're trying to escape their current high emotional pain, or what we call emotional dysregulation. And because it's so strong and they've done other things and it hasn't worked, they're thinking this might be the way that it'll work. Yep.
Okay. All right. There's so much to kind of process here, but I think really helpful and really something I've not heard before. Like I like that I can feel the visual of this, that
Yep.
I can't do one side of it before I've done the other side of it, which I think is
Right.
really helpful.
That's right.
Nothing good comes out of that heightened emotion state, and in
That,
any space.
Yep. So Thomas Joyner has a really good model called the interpersonal theory of suicide that has 3 circles, concentric circles, right? And 2 of them are ones that we can really work on in school curricula. And so one of them is thwarted belonging, right? Trying to belong to a group of people, trying to find your in and your group, and being told, no, you're not okay. No, we don't want you. No, right? So that because we are social creatures and we want to try to belong and talk to people and be a part of a group, being told no really hurts, right? So that's one circle. The other circle is perceived burdensomeness, that the adolescent begins to see themselves as a burden to their family, to their friends. They have nothing unique to offer. Nobody's going to love them. They're never going to have a family. Those 2 things combined, the overlap of those 2 things is really hard for our adolescents. It's not until that 3rd circle, called capacity to engage in suicidal behavior, comes into play. And that 3rd circle intersecting with the other 2, that small spot where all 3 places intersect, is the place where they can make a lethal attempt for suicide. So we can engage in interventions on the thwarted belongingness and the perceived burdensomeness pretty well. Some of the DBT skills do that. Some of the cognitive behavior skills do that, right? And so zones of regulation, providing again, some of the social bonding and school bonding that takes place. Ruler, again, the type of thing of with their mood meter, trying to work on those pieces of feeling less burdensome, right? Less thwarted belongingness. And if we can do that, we know that we start to reduce the area in which it overlaps with capacity for suicidal behavior.
Okay, so Jessica found the link for our interview with Mark Brackett, who gives an explanation about his process called Ruler. So you can see that in the chat. And then my last question for you, because we like to leave on something hopeful. You gave a speech. The speech sounds kind of an oxymoron. The bright side of youth suicide. So what is there on the bright side of suicide?
Right. So it's an edu talk, right, out of the University of Washington, and so it's attached to my my page at the University of Washington, my faculty page. What I was trying to do is say, look, suicidal behavior is a big issue, right? We just talked about suicide being the 2nd leading cause of death from 10 to 19 in our country. When you drill down on those statistics, and this is something I do as a suicidologist, if you look at ages 14 separately, just 14, and age 15 separately, suicide is the leading cause of death. Not second, leading. It's not until 16 years old does it fall down to the second leading cause of death, primarily because automobile accidents, accidental injuries becomes first, and it's the automobiles. Kids get their driver's license, right? So it's a big, big issue. The bright side of suicide in that discussion is to say, look, no more are we going to let these ships go through in the dark anymore. This is not a topic that we should be covering up, putting under the rug, saying it's just a family issue. We're going to put the spotlight, just like you would as a lighthouse, shine to say, no, this is a bad spot. Don't come to this direction, right? So I want to put a light on this topic so that we can talk about it more, so that parents can see this beacon and say, whoa, I've got to do something. If I can see that lighthouse, if something's going on, I should be asking questions.
Okay, I'm going to ask a second last question.
Yeah.
So there was so much controversy around 13 Reasons Why, and
Yes.
they got plenty of things wrong, but maybe that did elevate the conversation because we were all talking about it.
Totally did, right? So the one thing that 13 Reasons Why did on the plus side is it made the conversation in mainstream, which we couldn't do for the last 30 years. It did in 13 episodes. So absolutely. Did they get a lot of things wrong? Yes, a lot. Did they do messaging that looks terrible and is not what normally happens? Yes, right? And so it's just, we had a really hard time as suicidologists watching that, knowing teens were binging on that, right? And so I was coming out and saying, look, this isn't how this works. This isn't how this usually happens. Number two, dead people don't come back and have these conversations with you, right? And so there was a lot of discussion about that. And we know that the calls to crisis lines increased dramatically during that time as well. That could be good, or it could be a signal that, hey, this is touching some territory and activating people who are thinking, are feeling suicidal. So tough about that. Oh, thank you for putting that into the chat.
Jessica's there. Great. She's very responsive and finds everything. Okay. Dr. Jim Mazza, tell me how you pronounce it again.
Mazza, you're right.
Okay. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thanks for having me.
And really, there's so much for us to think about now and hopefully change the way we speak to our teenagers. And thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Be glad to come back anytime. Take care, everyone.